Hi, Caitria. Welcome to the Empowered Nutrition Podcast. How are you?
Hi, I'm great. I'm happy to be here.
So happy to have you. I can't wait to talk about this topic. I was just looking through everything you've created, and you're such a wealth of knowledge on this topic that I think touches so many couples, which is infertility and optimizing fertility. So thanks for your time today.
I'm so excited.
Same. So, fertility is, I think, a growing space, but it's not everyone's focus. Maybe you can tell me a little bit more about how did you get into the space that you're in?
Sure. So, fertility work kind of found me. I started my practice actually specializing in pediatrics. When I graduated from acupuncture school and began practicing, very shortly thereafter, I gave birth to my daughter. And so that felt like, okay, this makes sense to specialize in that area. And then through working with children, I inevitably was having conversations with moms and realizing, oh my gosh, there's a huge gap in the fertility space and women's health in general. And so it just kind of unfolded naturally from there.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. So, and obviously you specialize in functional medicine in addition to being an acupuncturist. So tell
Yeah,
me about that, of how it sounds like the order of that was you started with acupuncture and then went back and got more training in functional medicine.
exactly. Yeah. And again, just like a very natural evolution. It
Mm.
was I have a brain that just really likes to learn more. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, it was just a flowy, like, okay, there's more going on here. Let's dig deeper. Let's look at this from all angles kind of thing.
Absolutely. So tell me where, you're close to this topic. So tell me your take on infertility. My impression is that it's somewhat of an epidemic. There's quite an increasing incidence of infertility and fertility challenges. Do you think that's true?
Absolutely. I think it's more and more problematic based on the world. Excuse me. I'm I'm sorry.
You're fine.
I need to just pause for a second.
You're okay.
Do you mind if I run to the restroom?
No problem. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, amazing. I will be right back. I'm
See
so
you
sorry.
soon. No problem.
Okay, I am back. My
Hey,
apologies.
you're fine. Are you okay?
Yeah,
Okay.
there's just a personal thing happening that is not relevant, but pops up every now and then.
Okay. Yeah. If you need to reschedule, no problem. Just let me know.
No, no, I think
Okay.
I'm good now.
Okay. Sounds good. All right. Let me go back here. All right. Well, yeah, let's start back again. So maybe tell me a little bit about the way you're seeing infertility currently, and I guess like in your space and like with your patient population.
Yeah, like I said, I think it's more and more prevalent based on the world that we live in being increasingly toxic and high stress, and our nutrients are our nutrients in our soil are depleted beyond anything we've ever experienced. And so for me, what I'm seeing is largely the deficit in foundational health is contributing to fertility issues.
Yeah. Yeah. It sounds like you think it's multifactorial. So nutritional, maybe adrenal and stress related.
Absolutely.
And then even like toxins themselves.
Absolutely.
So tell me about your approach to that. I know you have a program around fertility and you work one-on-one. So, I mean, it's just kind of a lot to take in. How do you typically walk someone through addressing infertility? Or, I mean, I'm sure you individualize everything, but what's your general process?
Yeah, what I've noticed is there tend to be, similar categories or pillars of areas that need optimization. So as I already mentioned, we assess nutrient status for sure. We address toxic load for sure. And we address metabolic health, thyroid health. Basically, we're just trying to turn over every stone that is otherwise left unturned. A lot of times people are coming to us because they haven't found answers in the Western fertility realm or women's health realm. And so those are stones that are largely not being turned over within that world. And so I have, kind of my list of curiosities when I'm working with someone and meeting them originally, where I just kind of ask questions and pull at those threads of, do we possibly have some nutrient deficiencies? Do we possibly have some underlying thyroid stuff going on? What's going on with blood sugar regulation and metabolic health and the way that that will then impact hormone health? What's going on with the stress response and adrenal function and all of those things? So yeah, it is like definitely layered and definitely unique to every individual situation, but we do tend to see some themes.
Yeah. Where you fall on, like, say, labs? Do you typically like have some labs that you like to order generally, or how does that go?
Yeah, so depending on the situation, sometimes people are coming to us with some labs already done. Sometimes we are running like a more comprehensive panel of blood labs than what a Western doctor would typically run. Maybe someone comes in and they're like, oh yeah, my labs are normal. My doctor said everything looks good.
Yeah.
And then one of two things happen. Either we look at those same labs and find things that were missed, or we look at those labs and we say, okay, this really doesn't provide a complete picture of what's going on. So for example, in the thyroid department, often it'll be usually it's just TSH that's getting run. And so we're missing a lot of information about what's going on in the thyroid. And so if we run then a full thyroid panel, we can find, all kinds of dysfunction and even subclinical dysfunction, meaning it maybe wouldn't have showed up on labs in the traditional Western ranges. It wouldn't have been identified. And so it's just that deeper look, that ability to kind of read between the lines and look for optimal ranges rather than normal, because normal is just a sort of an average of the population at large. And like we already said, our population is sicker than ever. So I don't personally want to be normal in a sick population. I would rather look for and strive for optimal health.
Yeah. Well, in thyroid, do you typically find is that like a common part of the problem with women who have fertility issues or challenges?
It often is. I would say when there's long-term trouble with trying to conceive, it is one of the curiosities that comes up, is like, okay, could this possibly be something that was missed? Because if there is dysfunction within the thyroid, that's going to impact, basically just about everything in the body. Thyroid being wonky can impact metabolic health and vice versa. It will impact hormone production. It will impact specifically like progesterone production. And I think, now more than ever, we're seeing this trend of estrogen dominance and how do we increase progesterone? And that's a layered topic too, but certainly
Yeah.
thyroid can be a hidden puzzle piece there.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. And when you see these patterns of thyroid dysfunction, what's the most common pattern you're seeing? Like, is TSH like technically normal but above a functional range? And like, what are the other, when you get like the full thyroid panel, what are the other common things you're seeing there?
Yeah, that's a great question. So often TSH will either be normal within Western ranges, or even sometimes it's still normal within functional ranges, but we have other markers that are pointing to like thyroid hormone conversion issues or cellular uptake issues. Like maybe we don't have enough, we have T4, but we're not able to convert it to T3. So T3 is low, or T3 uptake is low because maybe we can convert that thyroid hormone from T4 to T3, inactive to active form, but then we're not able at the level of the cell to take it up. And that requires, well, first of all, that requires the body to really not be in an active stress response, because if there's a stress response, or what could otherwise be called a cell danger response happening, the cells sort of shut down their receptivity to thyroid hormone, because what that cell danger response would indicate is there's some kind of invader, pathogen, what have you, that is a problem, and we need to deal with that. And through uptake of thyroid hormone, we're going to be producing more energy, and we don't want to be producing more energy and giving it to the pathogen or the disease pattern or whatever. So that's kind of the long and short of the why behind, like, why wouldn't the body take up thyroid hormone? Why would a body do that? It can be hard to understand if you're like, well, if my body is smart and it always knows what it's doing, what could be the reason there? But it actually does serve a very important biological purpose, because sometimes it's like, okay, we're in survival mode. We can't think about vitality functions right now. We just need to shut down the disease patterns or the cell danger response that's happening. Except if that cell danger response is actually then this long-term chronic issue, now we're stuck.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we see that a lot as well. And that's a tough thing to resolve. I mean, what are some of the most effective strategies you found for helping them to get out of that sort of like fight or flight mode?
It definitely looks different in every case. I have like a whole list of curiosity questions about where that cell danger response could be originating from. Like, okay, maybe we need to look at the gut. Do we have pathogenic influences within the gut that are going untreated? Like maybe an H. pylori infection or parasites, or even just we have, to really simplify it, too much of bad bacteria, not enough good bacteria. And that's creating, that's keeping the body stuck in a, oh boy, we're like, we gotta watch out kind of mode, rather than, okay, let's focus on vitality and or reproduction. So that's a big one. Another one would be just overall toxic load. So maybe we look at water quality. Maybe we look at, of course, food quality. Maybe we look at like the kind of personal care products that we're using. Maybe we look at, okay, maybe all of that is going okay, except the just general environmental exposures that we can't control are what they are, and our detox pathways aren't functioning properly to be able to clear that stuff from the body. And so we're retaining, our toxic bucket is getting fuller and fuller. So that would be another common one. I would say under eating is another one that could fall into that category. So I would really say almost every single person that comes to see us, we have to have the conversation of, is it possible that you might not be eating enough and you're not doing it on purpose? It is just maybe, long-term beliefs installed by diet culture, or I'm just a busy mom and I forget to eat, or whatever it is. So that's certainly a factor. And then nutrient deficiencies that go along with that. So as you can see, it could be many things, and there's many more. We could talk about that for the whole rest of our time together, but that kind of gives you an idea.
Yeah, I mean, it really is that, like, I think the more experience you get in this space, the more your thinking becomes more complex, and it becomes
Totally.
almost harder to be as, like, absolute about anything, because you know how complex everything can be. And so it's almost like it comes full circle, where it's like, okay, if I realize that like toxins in the water can disrupt like cellular health, that can disrupt my body's like thyroid conversion, that can further disrupt, and like there's also like the axis with like my adrenals and my gut and my thyroid that all go together. And it's like, okay, well, it's even if I get all the special expensive like functional medicine testing on this person, it's not going to change the complexity of this and necessarily um, clarify everything. So it's almost like I do less testing now than I used to, because it's like until we've done these like fundamental things, then it's a little bit pointless.
I could not agree more.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, you already touched on some of the fundamental things, like try to get. It sounds like you're talking about like, okay, try to get access to like filtered water that's safe. Think about not just think about diet quality. Maybe, I mean, I won't put words in your mouth, but in my mind, you're maybe touching on like both what foods should and should not be like classically included, the amount of food that should and energy that should be included, and maybe also like the sourcing of that food. Is that right?
Absolutely. I think it's really important to, like you said, start at the foundation, because you really can't skip steps. You can, like you
Mm.
said, you can have all the labs, you can do all the things, you can spend all the money on like the sauna or like the red light or the whatever biohacking tool. But if you are not drinking clean water and you are not eating food that is as, low on the contamination scale as possible, which, you really, that's all relative today anyway. If you're not doing that, if you're not sleeping well and getting, even like, if you're mouth breathing at night while you're sleeping instead of nose breathing, that can be something that would cause a whole cascade of issues, because if you're not getting good blood flow to your brain while you're sleeping, that's going to impact so many things down the line, including not only energy production via the thyroid, but also like your ability to have detoxification happening within your brain, and so on and so forth.
Mhm.
So beyond those basics, there's still more basics. Like, you can go from
Yeah.
the basics and the foundations and get.
The basics aren't that basic. It's like
Right,
a
no,
full
they're
life
really not,
makeover. That's a
especially
lot of
not.
work.
Yeah,
Yeah.
especially not in today's world. So yeah,
Yeah.
definitely those basics. I think making sure you're eating enough of whatever you're eating, and that would be specifically, are we eating enough protein? Are we eating carbs in a way that's supportive to the body? Like, we don't have to be afraid of them, but we also want to be intentional about where and when we're plugging them into our day. And movement is another piece. I see lots of women, right along with the under eating, they're over exercising. And so that's even depleting their bodies further and pushing them further into a stress response. And
Yeah.
that's, definitely going to directly impact the thyroid as well.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of times it's okay. We maybe don't need to do the Orange Theory class 5 days a week. Maybe we, walk for 20 to 40 minutes every day. And then we do like 2 to 3 days a week of some really nice progressive overload weight training.
Yeah.
That is a huge change that, interestingly enough, is one of the hardest to get people on board with, I would
Oh,
say.
absolutely. It's so difficult,
Yep.
which is weird because it's so fun. Like to me, it's my favorite, but yeah,
Same.
it's tough.
Yeah. But it's like,
Yeah.
it's once you're hooked, then you get it. But until you get to
Yes,
that
you
point, you're like,
don't.
that's a really big ask.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially because in some gyms, it's like, okay, the vibe isn't great for
Uh-huh.
women. If it feels like bro culture in there.
Totally.
Yeah. If that's real. How often do you get, I feel like it's a real tough, but also real common, where it's like the woman who um has been classified by BMI as overweight. She feels like she's overweight, but then on assessment, she seems to be under eating and over exercising.
Mhm.
um it's tough to thread that needle with that person of like how to address that. And I think you already kind of touched on part of what's happening there. Is, look, it's not just about the calories, it's also about the functioning of your cells, the health you have, the exposure to toxins, your hormones, your adrenal state, like their stress response that you're having, like all come into play in that. But like, how do you approach that situation? If I mean, I guess the first question is like, do you encounter that, and if so, how do you approach it?
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think it's inviting someone into the experience of unlearning and relearning. That is step one, because if the
Mhm.
beliefs are so locked in of like, the long-term, I like diet culture stuff, eat less, exercise more, the
Yeah,
calories in, calories out, whatever, like if they're locked in there, definitely. And they're locked in there with a lot of feelings and a lot of
yeah.
experiences and a lot of emotionality associated with it.
Mhm.
Definitely, I approach everyone differently that way based on, okay, what's the vibe here? But if they're, if they're chomping at the bit and they're ready for something else, beautiful. You lay it out and it's like, okay, yeah, that actually feels a lot better than this like hate myself, starve myself thing.
Yeah,
So I can latch onto that. But sometimes it's so layered that it takes like a gentle invitation and like, okay, let's open to the possibility that something else could be true, because this whole calories in, calories out, eat less, exercise more thing is largely what has gotten you to the place that you're in. So
yeah,
what if there's another solution that could walk you out of this path into like a different direction that would actually yield the results that you're looking for? Like, let's explore that a little bit.
yeah.
So yeah, I think it's definitely a deeply emotionally charged topic, and so I think
It
it
is.
deserves to be treated with care and kindness, and
Yeah.
like I said, that invitation to explore a different possibility for. And then beyond that, once it's like, okay, we're on board, now we talk about, let's figure out, we might do a little bit of a food journal or a look at, okay, where do we stand right now? And for curiosity, where does that relate to our total daily energy expenditure or our basal metabolic rate? And how far are we falling short of just those baseline needs? And we might look at, okay, how do we slowly feed up to that place so that
Mhm.
we can remind your body that we have the resources we need. It is safe to utilize them rather than conserve them, and step out of this survival place and into a place where we can have more robust internal function, more vitality, so that then, fertility and reproductive functions are once again on the table. Because if survival mode is the focus, reproduction is not going to be, at the top of the list. Because if it's like we feel
Absolutely.
right now biologically like there is a threat to our survival that could, take our life at any moment, we're not going to be thinking about, okay, but how do I grow another human right now? That's just not
Yeah.
on the list.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's like tricky for them, right? Because they're at the same time, maybe they even have PCOS and they're confronted with, okay, metabolic health is, I'm being told it's a barrier to my fertility. So I think our world is confusing to them of like, okay, well then I guess I should limit carbs and I should lose weight. And so it's just a real difficult space, I think.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it can get, there's a point where DIYing your way through it just doesn't make sense. And for
Mhm.
for some people it's like, okay, the foundational stuff will be enough. Like we just need to tip the scales this much and then your body can fill in and do the rest. And for some people, maybe the scales are out of balance in a much deeper way, and so we need layers and layers of very targeted, intentional, and even data driven support to, to right the ship and course correct. So I
Mhm.
think I mean, that's where a lot of people find themselves, is like, okay, I'm doing the things that everybody's talking about on social media. I'm like prioritizing protein, and I'm doing my hot girl walks, and I'm having a mineral mocktail and whatever.
Mhm.
But oftentimes there's just deeper nuance and uh, just a deeper complexity to the situation. And it's not, it really is not something you can DIY your way out of. It's really helpful to have someone who has a different way of looking at it and sort of does that for a living. Like
Yeah.
you wouldn't try to hop on a boat and go across the Gulf of Mexico if you don't know how to drive a boat. Like you just wouldn't do that
Yeah.
because you would find yourself struggling. You would charter that boat and you would have someone help you do that so that you could have the experience you want to have of deep sea fishing or whatever it is. But
Yeah.
you wouldn't take that on yourself because it's not within your skill set. And that's
Yeah.
perfectly fine because why would it be?
Yeah.
It's not some deep sea fishing and or functional medicine, fertility work. Those are not like common skill sets.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, tell me, yeah, what came to mind is I specialize in gut work and I have a
Mhm.
membership with other practitioners that specialize in gut work. And we had our monthly meeting yesterday, and there was like a few people that said now the newest thing they're seeing is they're getting people that have gone on Chat GPT and had Chat GPT generate a protocol for them, and they bought all this stuff and took it and messed up their gut even more.
Mhm.
So it's just so tricky for people because I think, I mean, it's easy for us to say, like, okay, just find a functional medicine practitioner that can help you. But on the other side, I have seen people that have tried even that and they've been kind of scammed, or they've had protocols I think are unsafe. And so it's really difficult because it's not a well regulated space and there's like some quacks out there. So I feel
Yeah,
like
it's
it's
the Wild
hard for
West.
them. Yeah. Okay, so for some of the top things, it sounds like diet quality, toxin exposure. What about, tell me a little bit more about, like, I think you kind of touched on like personal care products. I'm thinking you're meaning like cosmetics, lotions, shampoos, conditioners, body wash, like things we're putting on our body. I always kind of put that in my initial template, and like everybody in my practice does, but I don't find that people tend to jump on that. It's actually like really tough to get people to go ahead and do that project, I guess, of
Mhm.
making over their routine. So I'm curious, like, how much do you really emphasize that piece of it? And do you find that to be like a big, like, pretty impactful generally?
I think it is really important, and I think it's probably similar to like weight training. It's one of the things that is maybe like, oh, I'd rather, that feels really daunting, and it feels like, dipping my toe in that would be overwhelming, and so I'm just gonna I'm just
Hmm.
gonna pretend that doesn't exist. Human
Right.
brains love to do that.
Yeah.
So I think it is helpful to like do an audit of that alongside someone. Like, okay, let's talk about your deodorant, and like think about. I always try
One
to
at a time.
prioritize
Hmm.
the most common exposures. Like if you use hairspray 6 times a year like I do, I'm not so worried about the hairspray that you're using, but I
Hmm.
am worried about what's in your toothpaste that you're using twice a day, and the deodorant that you're putting on every day, and even the shampoo and conditioner that you're cleaning your hair with multiple times a week. So I think that first is helpful because sometimes you look at all of it and it's like I don't even know where to start.
Yeah.
But I tell people, okay, either pick the thing that is about to run out on your shelf, like, oh, I'm low on toothpaste. Okay, let's work on that first because then you can replace that as you have a need. And it's rather than thinking of it as like we have to burn everything down today, throw it all away and start over. It's not sustainable and it is overwhelming. And
Yeah.
pretty
One
much
at a
nobody
time.
has the bandwidth to do that in the world that we live in, either
Yeah.
the mental bandwidth or even the financial bandwidth. It's a lot.
Mhm.
So yeah, to be able to take it step by step and either focus on, okay, here's what's low, or here's my most common exposures, I'm going to start there. I think that is helpful. And again, I come back to why it's important to, be supported through the process, because to try to do that on your own is one thing, but to have someone say, okay, I've tried 17 deodorants already and this is the only one that works. So go ahead and try that one first.
Yeah.
Or, if you like this flavor, this toothpaste will work for you. If you prefer this flavor, this toothpaste, like just
Hmm.
having that. it's like having a conversation with a friend who's recommending like, you know, their favorite lip color. Like they're telling you from experience, right? Versus just like, okay, let me scour the depths of the internet. And now because the topic of hormone health and toxic load is a little bit more trendy, there's tons and tons of companies out there trying to capitalize on that with, greenwashed marketing where the product isn't actually what you think it is,
Yeah.
or just a product that simply doesn't work. So it's
Right.
definitely helpful to have someone who's already been the guinea pig, done the legwork, and has some tried and true things to offer you. I think that's pretty helpful too.
Yeah. Are there any like aside from just your personal recommendations, are there any like databases that you find helpful, like to send to people? Like it used to be the EWG, but that's
Mhm.
been now like criticized a lot. There's one we like to send that's called Think Dirty, but there's some issues with that.
Yeah.
You like that one?
I do. I think none of them are perfect, but I do like Think Dirty. That is one that I recommend as well.
Mhm.
Yeah, that tends to be the top one. I think, there's more, like there's Yuka or whatever, however you say
Yeah.
that one, YUKA. I haven't used it personally. I have some clients who have found it helpful, but I think nothing is going to replace, you can't completely outsource your agency to an app or to ChatGPT or whoever. That you need to maintain some level of your own discernment within it, because none of those apps are perfect. None of their Whether it's okay, everything is bought and paid for by somebody, someone is profiting off of this, someone is benefiting from this, whether it's that, or whether it's maybe this isn't a super well-funded project and they have great intentions, but they don't have the manpower, the financial backing to do
Right.
like really robust research. And it could be either, it could be something else entirely, but yeah, no, none of them are perfect, but I do like Think Dirty.
Yeah. Okay, cool. What are some other like common, I don't want to say like mistakes, but some sort of like maybe blind spots that you see a lot where it's like, wow, this is like relatively low hanging fruit that women can address that they're maybe not thinking about?
In general, or still specific to toxic load?
I would say for fertility.
Okay, cool. So the under eating, I'm going to come right back to that. I guess my definition of low hanging fruit would be different than the average person, because there are things that are
Yeah.
like flashing neon signs to me as someone who does this work all day, every day.
Hmm.
And to the average person, not so much. So to
Hmm.
me, that low hanging fruit would be definitely under eating. Almost everybody is. Many, and that's a broad generalization, but within my client base, I can say that is
Yeah.
certainly
Same.
largely true.
Yeah.
Um, and so many people are not eating breakfast, and they're either like, oh, I've just never been a breakfast person, or I'm not hungry, and I'm kind of trusting my hunger cues and what have you. And I can appreciate that. And also, your hunger cues are driven by other foundational health markers, or factors. And so if those are, a little wonky, then we kind of can't trust the hunger cues and
Hmm.
the timing of that. So that actually goes right back to metabolic health, thyroid health, because if our thyroid function is downregulated and overall metabolic mitochondrial function, energy production, energy utilization is downregulated, then you are not going to have the same robust hunger cues that you would if
Hmm.
you were firing on all cylinders metabolically.
Yeah,
So that's
absolutely.
definitely a big one too. I guess another area that I would consider low hanging fruit that I'm talking about very often with clients would be the either over exercising or choosing types of exercise that aren't necessarily conducive to fertility outcomes. Like maybe we're doing, really long bouts of steady state cardio and we're doing them fasted, and it's just not it's not hormone supportive, especially in a body where the adrenals are depleted and the thyroid is under functioning, and metabolic function has been turned down for survival. then compound that with, okay, on top of that, now we're increasing we're doing types of movement that are increasing the stress response even further. And that just becomes kind of a dumpster fire.
Yeah, it really does. Yeah. And it's absolutely life-changing. I mean, that maybe
For
goes
sure.
without saying, but I think that's the thing about fertility is that can be it's just like a central part of like human existence to plan a family. And not that everybody should have children, but for many women who do want to have a child, and if you're I've personally been in that situation where like one of those in my 20s, I had amenorrhea, and this was quite some time ago, but it was exactly that: under eating, over exercising. I saw several health practitioners for it, just traditional like providers, and they put me on birth control. It's
Mhm.
like that's just such a non-fix for any of it. And obviously if you're trying to get pregnant, that's not what they do, but just the band-aid approach to it is so subpar. And it literally did drive some of my like career decisions. Like, for example, I was at that time in college at the Air Force Academy and wanted to potentially become a pilot, which incurs like a 10-year active duty military commitment. And I actually like declined that because I knew I wanted to have a family. And I felt like, okay, if I already, obviously I'm not getting my period very much. I think I'm going to have fertility problems if I'm also committing to be active duty for really like 12 years by the time you become a pilot and then start that 10-year clock. That's going to make it even harder because there's going to be like deployments and like getting stationed all over the place. So it literally changed my entire career, my entire life, just around thinking I had some like core fundamental problem about my body. And all along, it was just that basic thing was, I mean, again, this was like maybe 2000, like early 2000. So that there was there was no Instagram, there was less knowledge around this, but it's still like, as you said, pervasive, that this very simple thing of kind of under eating and over exercising is happening and women just don't see it. I think and in fact, they're sometimes being encouraged. Like I see
Right.
that a lot, especially with women who have PCOS.
Yeah.
They've been told they need to lose weight. As soon as they start to under eat and over exercise, they're getting like, okay, good job. Like you're
Mhm.
doing so great. Like, look at you working on this. So it's kind of a mess.
It is a mess. It is. It absolutely is. And I think a lot of that, like I said earlier, is there's as the diet color culture conversation is, I think, largely changing or beginning to change, but there's still a lot of deep-seated beliefs that remain within the
Yeah.
generation of women who was most deeply touched by that.
Hmm.
And it is it's definitely very prevalent within Western medicine. There's so much black and white, and that does lend itself to that, okay, calories in, calories out, eat less,
Hmm.
exercise more, like that. It's when you treat the body like a math equation, you're missing bioindividuality, and you're missing the nuance, and you're missing the gray in between the lab values that are in black and white. And
Hmm.
yeah, so many people fall through the cracks, and especially when the interventions that I often say, when all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So if your toolbox contains birth control, if someone has period problems and they're not trying to get pregnant, or like maybe metformin or Clomid or
As I
letrozole,
say, Cloman. Yeah.
exactly. If that's your toolbox, that's what you're going to use.
Mhm.
I love to assume positive intent and, believe that within the Western medical model, there are so many people trying to do so much good with the tools and resources that they've been taught.
Mhm.
And I think the tools that they're given largely fall short of the complexity and the nuance of the human body, and specifically and especially the female body, because there's so much
Yeah.
more. It's so much more layered as far as the changing hormonal rhythms and the way that that impacts all the rest of the things. And especially
Absolutely.
looking at the fact that most most studies are done on men because they provide more reliable data.
Yeah.
That's how can we extrapolate if that's the reason, if women respond differently and therefore we want to test, do studies on men so that we can get clearer data. how do we think that we can extrapolate that same information to the women that we've already said, oh, they're going to respond differently to this? That just, of course, that's going to fall short.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. There's so little research to base any of this on because of what you said. So that makes it tough.
Right. And I think
What about, yeah.
for my brain, the thing that makes sense, and this is why I love that I have Chinese medicine background and I have, functional medicine to compound that, because with one, you get a really deep understanding of how the body operates in terms of systems. Chinese medicine looks at how are all of the parts and pieces influencing the whole, rather than, maybe a more silo based, like, okay, this doctor treats this organ and this doctor treats feet and this doctor treats whatever. That it allows for especially blending that with the zooming into the micro of the data of functional medicine. You then don't lose sight of the forest through the trees, because you can hold space for both the big picture system relationships happening, with body system relationships happening, and also, pair that with the finer nuance and details of, okay, here's where this lab marker is sitting right now, and here's how that impacts, here's how the dominoes fall because of that, and how this one lab marker can relate to every single body system. And so that marriage, I think, is so crucial. And with I think sometimes it's, well, I would imagine, I don't know because this isn't how I practice, but I would imagine it would be easier to just go, okay, every person who comes in the door with this condition gets this protocol. That would be really a whole lot easier, a lot simpler.
Yeah.
And you don't have to factor in all that complexity, all that nuance, but then you miss a large majority of, it's not going to work for a large majority of people because of the complexity. So to be able to see it all and understand the body from that way, and not have the complexity feel confusing, is really like an important skill set, and not one that is like widely accessible at this point, I would say.
Right.
Even in the functional medicine space, it's like you can get lost in the data. So if you're not able to then, pull back and make sense of it in the context of the body as an operating system, then again, you're going to fall short.
Yeah, absolutely. Are you more often getting women who have already tried more that kind of traditional sort of um, formulaic path where, like you said, there's like, okay, let's look at Clomid, let's look at IUI, let's look at IVF. There's sort of this escalating thing. Maybe, like you said, metformin if they have insulin resistance. Have they typically tried that and it's been ineffective, or is it that they're kind of like preferring to not go that route?
I think it's more the former. More so, it's people reach a point where either Western medicine no longer has answers for them, or they've been given an answer that they're not comfortable with. Like they've been told IVF is the next step, and that doesn't feel right for them.
It's a bridge too far.
Yeah. Or they've tried, okay, I've done 3 rounds of Clomid and didn't get the result we were looking for. And now, and now what, or it's just the unexplained infertility, labs are normal, and, just keep trying and hope for the best and don't stress. And, you've got plenty of time, you're young, all of that leaves that's usually what puts people in front of us, is like, okay, I'm not finding answers at all, or I'm not finding answers that I like. There's got to be something else out there. And thank goodness there is. And, that's why we're here.
Yeah. I really like how you kind of describe the body as like such a complex system. And, we've touched on some of the like fundamental things that feed into like these many branching effects. And I think maybe another one is sleep. And so I'm curious if you focus on, how often do you feel like sleep is kind of a barrier, part of the problem when it comes to fertility? And what are some of the things that you see as like effective around that realm? I mean, maybe I want to drive the direction too much, but I do think we live in a world where like there's a lot of hustle. The economy is hard for young people. And so there's like often like they're working 2 jobs, that maybe they're on their phones at night. And like, I don't know, if it seems like sleep could be really threatened by all that, but I'm curious what you think on all that.
Absolutely. I think, yeah, to go, just dovetail right off of what you said, I think there's low hanging fruit, which again, maybe would just be low hanging fruit to someone who does this every day and not so much to
Right.
the average individual. But
Yeah.
the low hanging fruit would be like, okay, what if we wear blue light blocking glasses at night, or we try to like inch our screen time away from bedtime, or I've even had it where, well, a couple of directions to go with this. Sometimes it's a blood sugar thing. A lot of times it's a blood sugar thing. If we're having trouble falling asleep or staying asleep, if it's just simply we're not allowing ourselves to sleep, then that's like lifestyle stuff. Maybe we need to bring in some nervous system regulation support throughout the day, circadian rhythm support. Maybe we just need to set new boundaries with ourselves and understand the importance and the benefit of sleep. I always have my clients rate their energy level on a scale of 1 to 10. And 10 is like you're doing cartwheels, you're feeling great. 1 is like you're scraping yourself out of bed. And
Yeah.
if they are anywhere below an 8, we do not pass go. We do not collect $200. We do nothing. We sleep. Because if you're not sleeping enough or getting quality sleep,
Yeah.
your energy production is going to be severely impacted by that. And fertility is a very energy intensive, the process of getting pregnant, staying pregnant, and
Yeah.
growing a human is a very energy intensive process. I mean, an egg cell has 10 times the mitochondria or the energy factories of any other cell in the body. So if that's not working, like we do not pass go, we focus on that. So if it's just simply we need to shift our priorities mentally around that, that's one category. And then if it's I actually can't fall asleep, or I can't stay asleep, or, there's some disordered sleep going on, then I definitely look at blood sugar. And I also still look at nervous system regulation, and look at, those are really like the 2 biggest components that I'm going to explore. So yeah, I think it is crucial. 2, if it's like, you're glorifying team no sleep and you're doing that whole hustle culture thing,
Mhm.
again, an invitation to looking at things a little bit differently
Yeah.
is a helpful place to start. And then if it's like, no, I just overtly, like I would love to sleep, but I can't, or I
Yeah.
struggle there, then yeah, we get into, that takes us right back to, are you under eating throughout the day? And therefore your blood
Right.
sugar is, not staying stable through the night. And then you're having cortisol spikes that are waking you up, or is your nervous system so jacked up throughout the day that you're not falling into normal circadian rhythms throughout the night? Those are the biggest players that I see.
Yeah. Totally agree on that. And I like how you keep kind of saying or alluding to that fact that like low hanging fruit means like things you can do that aren't necessarily like super invasive or
Right.
like a $25,000 procedure, but
Right.
it's in some ways the hardest because it can literally
Absolutely.
mean like I've had clients who are like physicians that left medicine to focus on their health to have a baby, or like I mean it can literally be, I mean women are in a tough spot in our society. I think we like now work at least full time typically, especially if we don't have children, and even after we have children. So then but if we want to have more children, now we're working and we have a child. We're also doing the majority of the household work. We are confronted by, all the modern challenges around screens and like social tensions and like our societal pressures. And we still have our old aunties and mommies and grandmas pushing diet culture on us, or like Women's Health Magazine or whatever at the
Mhm.
checkout line. I mean,
Mhm.
it's a really tough, stressful time, I think, for everyone. But I think for a woman who's trying to have a baby, I think that certainly impacts their physiology. And it's what I'm trying to say is it's not easy to overcome all that. So, and
Right.
even just like it's very expensive to buy natural beauty care products that like work well. Like
Mhm.
that's just another piece of this. Like just one example of like it's tough, and it can sometimes even be that like it's it's life changing in terms of like the trade-offs that women have to make when it comes to this. And that can be, I think, a really tough part of this space because, it's easier said than done to buy organic food, get a reverse osmosis filter, completely remake your personal care products, give up screen time and like at night and like, maybe sell the house, or like get a cheaper house or get a cheaper living space, a smaller apartment or whatever it is so that you like can work less. I mean, it's actually the hardest thing, but it's also maybe disingenuous. I think what traditional medicine maybe does is it suggests to women that there's no problem with our lifestyle and our culture. And it's just a matter of taking this medicine or doing this procedure and everything is fine. It's actually a harder, but maybe it's a truer thing, but also a more difficult thing to actually confront the truth, maybe. And I don't know if you agree on this, but it's kind of what I've come to is that the truth is that our society has become unfriendly to pregnancy and fertility for women. And that is a tough barrier, but I don't know what you think on that.
Yeah, I think that, I say all the time that we live, our society, our culture, we are living completely at odds with our biology instead of in support of our biology. So when you, even just from that simple statement, it makes perfect sense why something that is completely dependent on foundational health would be worsening and worsening and worsening right now.
Yeah.
And fertility is optimal fertility is a byproduct of optimal foundational health, or at least good foundational health,
Yeah.
And that's going to look different for everybody too. Like at what point is your body ready? That's going to look different.
Yeah.
I use a lot of metaphors and analogies, and there's one that's like I don't know if this was like a universal experience or if this was just me, but I remember it in elementary school classrooms. It was like the shoot for the moon, and even if you miss, you'll land among the stars thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
I talk to my clients about that a lot because it can feel like, oh my gosh, like this is daunting. I have to change everything.
Daunting.
No, you can have your North Star. You can have you can have optimal as your goal. And then you also can be like, find peace with where you are and like peace with putting one foot in front of the other toward that North Star or that goal. Because the reality is you don't have to, perfection is not required in order to get the desired outcome. And that's not, I think that's another way that this can get skewed and problematic is I have a whole subset of my client population where it's the stress of trying to be perfect that is completely obstructive to their goal. The thing that they're wanting so much and trying so hard for and thinking about every second and basing every life action and decision off of, because it's coming from a place of a stress response and maybe the fear of, what if this never happens for me? If I'm not doing it perfectly, I'll never get pregnant.
Yeah.
I challenge those stories with my clients a lot too, because that I would almost rather see, I would like, let's not do the things then, if you're doing them from that place, it's not worth doing, because what your body on a cellular level is taking notice of is the undercurrent of fear and stress. And I'm not safe if all of this isn't going perfectly. And then I'll actually never think it's going perfectly. So I'm not safe at all.
Yeah.
That's huge. So
that's probably the biggest value, I think, of working with a professional. Because if you're just you could get the same information maybe from Instagram or YouTube, but the problem there is you don't have your voice that you've just given is so on point and so good, of like someone just telling you, you're seeing all this information of stuff you should be doing, but it's actually okay if you're not doing all that. Yeah. And it's probably better if you're not doing all that. Yeah. Good. I love it. Well, Caitria, you're obviously incredible. And I'm sure that people would love to hear more about how they can connect with you. What are some ways that people can learn more about your practice and potentially connect with the work you're doing?
Yeah. So I hang out on Instagram a lot, and that is where I like to do a lot of educating and sharing client cases and, talking about my flavor of, my take on fertility work. And and all of that. So on Instagram, my handle is at Connected Healing Caitria. And if you need spelling for that, I'm sure you'll be able to find it in the show notes or
Absolutely.
something
We
like
will
that.
link it.
And then our website for our practice is another great place to be able to just learn more about what we do. And we've got some, good free resources there to get you started and kind of introduce you to our world. And we have a few different ways that we work with clients. We have an in-person clinic in the Milwaukee area, and then we also work with clients virtually all across the US. And so both Instagram and our website, connectedhealingllc.com, is going to have the opportunities to pursue that further if you should be interested.
Caitria, I want to go back to when I was 25 and hire you, but thankfully there are many women who are in that place and you're available to them. And so what an incredible asset you are to the world. So thanks for sharing so much today. And of course, we'll link everything in the show notes so that people can follow you and connect with you.
Amazing. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. This was so fun. I could talk about this stuff all day long.
Same. All right. Thanks again and have a good rest of your day.
You too.
Thanks.